Delighted to welcome Dr. Ibrahim Salama from UN Human Rights to our new dialogue series. Religions for Peace is initiating these dialogues with various multilateral institutions to provide insight for our global multi-religious movement on the work of your organization. To start, I would like to invite you to share with us a little bit about yourself, your position, and the work that you and your office are doing. Please.
Thank you, Sarah. For too long, the human rights work and the work on religions and faith traditions have been like parallel tracks. While if you really come to think about it, they're speaking about the same thing. It's about human dignity. It's what you owe to yourself, to your society, to the others. It's how you treat people in general. So I was struck from the very beginning. I have been working with the UN Human Rights Office since 14 years now. I have struck by the fact that religions and rights are kind of planets or ships passing in the night or parallel tracks. Of course, the last 10 years has witnessed points of meeting in different ways, but never in a fully coherent and conceptually consistent manner in a way. So the work on rights is very much relevant to religions. It's just the terminology that is different.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And you already mentioned it, that there was now a stronger connection between your work on human rights and religion. Why do you partner with faith-based civil society actors?
Faith-based actors are human rights defenders in their own right, in their own way, in their own language. Far more than mere advocacy to something, which is the main characteristic of civil society at large, which is a good thing. Faith-based actors are also much more nearer to service. So it's not only to advocate for something, it's to care and serve for individuals and communities directly. Mm-hmm. So they are even more at the heart of the matter, even than average civil society actors, if you see what I mean. So for me, they are a privileged partner because of their proximity to the rights holders. As I said, I'm working with the treaty bodies in particular, which monitor state compliance with their obligations. Recently, many expert bodies that monitor state compliance with the human rights ratified obligations start to ask questions about the relationship between religious institutions and actors and the state. Because take FGM, for example, or any harmful practices for women and girls. In many parts of the world, unfortunately, it's still wrongly associated with religion. Mm-hmm. So like CEDAW, the Committee on Combating Discrimination Against Women, realized this importance. So it started to ask questions to states about, do they reach out to their own religious communities and their faith-based organizations? Do they associate them or not? So progressively, I was going to say, in a way, out of necessity, probably much more than choice, maybe. I don't want to judge intentions, but it was sporadic and it was contextual. But now, increasingly, there is realization, and that's again why I'm very keen to enhance the relationship with the faith-based organizations. They're extremely influential. You cannot avoid them. And they have a predominantly positive impact. Of course, one has to say that some religious voices, rather on the extreme side of human interpretation of religions, are going in the wrong direction from a perspective of human rights and equality. But all the reason as well to address them and to engage with them in dialogue. Maybe to take a concrete example about how and why we engage with them. The Faith for Rights Initiative at the UN, human rights are numerous. And the mantra of human rights in the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, which established the Office of the High Commissioner where I work, says that human rights are interrelated, interdependent, and should be dealt with on equal emphasis. When it comes to religion, if you say religion in a sphere of human rights, people will immediately think freedom of religion or belief as a human rights, which is perfect. But this does not exhaust the role of religion on human rights, because all the other rights, whether it's freedom of expression, women's rights, minority rights, economic, social, and cultural rights, you will find that religions has a lot of similarities. There are too many dots to be linked positively in this vein. Another important example is the area of economic, social, and cultural rights. I would say with all confidence that I find that religions go much further and much higher than the actual level of positive human rights law in terms of defending economic, social, and cultural rights. In the religious sphere, the rights of the poor and needy are quantified, are mandatory, are inalienable. If you approach the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, you will find that it has two caveats that relatively weakens it. It is the progressive realization of economic, social, and cultural rights, and also it's the principle that states' obligations are only within their available resources. So of course, this is a little bit, this makes economic rights a little bit less digestible, less targeted, less defined in many ways. In the religious sphere, no, it comes at a much higher level. So I really believe that the human rights community has a lot to learn from engaging with faith actors, because their balance eventually between economic rights and civil and political rights, between individual rights and community rights, is probably have a lot to enrich the human rights movement as well.
Mm. Thank you. Allow me to draw a connection to the current situation. We're currently living in the time of a global pandemic, and it has become clear already that not a single sector of our societies have been left unaffected. Please share with us your insights on the effect of COVID-19 that on human rights, and if you see any specific value in partnering with faith-based actors in the times of COVID-19.
COVID-19 is an amazing experience that we cannot grasp yet because of its density and because it's still unfolding. However, what I retain from it at a personal level is that from a human rights perspective and engagement with faith actors' perspectives, first, it added to the importance of their role, because in a situation of confinement or limitation of movement, it's the nearest actors to the individuals, the communities, who have an edge. And this applies very much to religious actors. Also, I think the crisis begs and promotes solidarity and compassion, which, as I just said, religions have a higher threshold for this commitment. It's not charity. I mean, I am personally intellectually uncomfortable with using the term charity, even in the religious sphere. Without quoting religious texts, some of them speak about a right, and a specified, a quantifiable right. In many traditions, I don't want to specify or mention one and not the other. And this in itself, in a time of a COVID-19 crisis, where the most vulnerable groups, whether they are weak or people with handicaps or people who lost their jobs or communities of minority people or living in remote areas, they need that, but they don't need it as a charity. And that's why the role of religious actors in this context is even much higher than before. As I mentioned earlier, one of the major examples that on which the Office of the High Commissioner and I was personally involved in a direct standard setting, that's the novelty. The Faithful Rights Framework is a series of 18 commitments that define the human rights responsibilities of religious and faith-based actors in the society. And they range from, if you just type faithful rights, you will go on the webpage of the Office of the High Commissioner, and you will have two main documents. One is the framework itself, which is what are the commitments, who owes what to who in area of religious authorities and leaders and actors. What are the human rights obligations and commitments? The second document is a toolkit, which is an implementation tool, which is a methodology of peer-to-peer learning. It provides exercises, it provides examples, it provides even artistic expressions. And if you ask me, also one of the most stimulating things that I find in the religious sphere and with faith-based actors that I cannot get in the human rights arena, or I get much less, is this dimension of spiritual artistic expression. It's part of the rituals of every religion to have something, whether it's called recitation, whether it's performance, that involves corporal movement, whether it's singing, and particularly in collective modes. And all of this, I think, adds a dimension of perception and persuasion that mere advocacy and mere legalistic approaches to the rights and duties of individuals cannot take you there. It's very material. It's scratching the surface of committing to a cause or engaging to fraternity. So the Faithful Rights Framework, we updated it recently. If you type it, you will see that we're around at the 8th edition since it was adopted only in January. And the main reason is COVID-19, because so many developments came, and with each of these developments, for example, Religions for Peace, which is a fantastic organization in terms of the scope of outreach and the nature of its mission, how it is one of the, because in the religious spheres there are so many religious organizations and there are much fewer interfaith and interreligious organizations. So it is this oneness, this holistic approach, this coming together on an interfaith basis, I think, that distinguish Religions for Peace. If you look at the statements that they did on COVID-19 and the partnership that is emerging and the upcoming events like the webinar between CEDAW, Committee on the Women's Rights, and Religions for Peace with all its national and regional structures, this is exactly linking the dots. This is trying to be inspired by Religions for Peace. You do everything on an interfaith basis. We are trying to contribute to your methodology by adding an interdisciplinary dimension as well. So it's not only interfaith, it's interfaith and interdisciplinary in the sense that it brings the two communities of human rights and of faith to work together on the same cause. And that's why I'm excited about the horizon of this event on women's rights in the COVID-19 context from both faith and rights perspectives. Not only these two spheres were not talking to each other, they were presented as antagonistic or as dichotomy most of the time, and this is still the case. So it's an emerging new dimension. I think human knowledge can only be enhanced if you confront disciplines to each other, people to each other, culture to each other.
Thank you so much. You just shared with us what is so inspiring and also stimulating about the work and how these different sides are coming together. Is there also, allow me to ask this, is there also something that you sometimes find maybe frustrating about the work with religious and communities and faith-based actors?
Two things frustrate me a lot. One is the attempt to oppose the sacred to the reflective or to the free, as if something is sacred, it means one shouldn't discuss it. While all divine messages are messages of a dialogue, including the evil and the good. So the idea of taking anything for granted is, I think, wrongly associated with religions, as if religions are only about submission, while humans are only about freedom. No, religions are also about freedom, and human rights are also about responsibilities. You see what I mean? So what frustrates me is this, it's like the moon, the dark side and the shining side. On religions, many tend to only see and project dark side, if I dare to say. You will forgive me the expression. It's human interpretation, not the religion, that have dark side. And on human rights, it's the opposite. While they're both turning, the problem is that even while turning, they don't seem to see each other. So what frustrates me is the political manipulation of the sacred to suppress people's free will. And this is predominant in the religious sphere. It's not the rule, it's not how it should be, and it's not how it's always is. But there is a tendency to manipulate in the name of religions. Again, I do not want to give example because of the political sensitivity, but everybody can think of examples where religions have been manipulated to inject masses and put them. All the radicalization movements are a perfect worst example of how feelings and this notion of submission kind of paralyzes the mind. So That's why we focus a lot on the critical thinking in the religious sphere as one of the 18 commitments on faithful rights. I invite those interested to have a look at both the 18 commitments and the toolkit and the exercises that are meant to establish a debate about them, because they try to do the double holisticness, the double oneness, a oneness among the faith traditions being interfaced, and also an interdisciplinary approach that brings the human rights notions, because frankly, who cares about the narratives? Words are very important. They transmit the most precious values, but they're also traps. So we need to unpack words. If you unpack words, you will find a new common language. This alternative narrative is something missing. I'm extremely frustrated when I see people saying the same thing, but are diametrically opposing each other, simply because of words and because of ideology that comes with the choice of words. So too many things frustrating, but I take this frustration as a positive factor, because it incites us to think and to think differently and to think outside the box and to debate more and more.
Thank you so much. Finally, I would like to offer you the opportunity to say a few words in your own conclusion about your work and about the current situation. Maybe there's something you envision at the moment for the future. Maybe there's something you're criticizing or decrying. And yeah, if you have any advice that you would like to share with the Religions for Peace global movement, I invite you to take this space now.
I think that the Religions for Peace is a global movement, and every interfaith action will benefit a lot. It badly needs this interdisciplinarity. So I appeal to everybody that we try to, again, unpack the terms and extract the meanings and work together on these meanings. I think the notion of peer-to-peer learning is very important. In religious traditions, especially the spiritual masters of real, genuine weight, they're people of teaching in the first place. They're teachers, but they never stop to learn at the same time. So learning from each other on interfaith and in interdisciplinary manner always is, I think, the road for the future. This crisis has only one lesson. If it has only one lesson, COVID-19, it's very simple. Nobody is safe unless and until everybody is safe. What message of fraternity can reach that level? Your neighbor is sick, you're not safe. So you have to care about his welfare. He has to be well fed, and he or she has to be in good health, and you both deserve. If you get the best of medical service and your neighbor or your employer doesn't get it, the virus is in your own lungs. So it's extremely unifying in the most powerful, almost unimaginable way, although we live it. But we have not extracted these meanings yet. So it's, again, a virus that should essentially bring people much closer together. They should care genuinely about each other, if not out of good heart, at least out of self-interest.
Dr. Ibrahim Salama, this was extremely helpful and insightful to our multi-religious movement around the world to better understand the work of UN Human Rights, and particularly the work of your office. Thank you so much for joining and for being part of the dialogue series.